to start with a question, and we're going to have a little conversation. So everyone has to be honest. I'm going to ask this question, and you've got to raise your hand if it's true. Who in this room has thought about moving your family or your business out of New Jersey to another state like North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Arizona? Raise your hand if you have. So I start a lot of my talks with that question. And 90% of the hands go up. It's a good time for me to give you some facts about New Jersey that are a little troubling, that might explain why so many families and businesses are leaving the state. Number one, and you're not going to be surprised at all, New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the United States, by far. Fact number two, since 2014, New Jersey is ranked dead last of all states in business and regulatory climate, according to the Tax Foundation. There's way too much red tape in this state to do business. These ladies can certainly testify to that. Fact number three, New Jersey has the highest corporate business tax rate in the country at 11.5%. Another fact, North Carolina has the lowest, 2.5%. I actually have a bill that would bring down our corporate business tax rate to 2.5% over 4 years. North Carolina's rate is why so many families and businesses are leaving for North Carolina, taking their executives and taking our jobs down there. Fact number four, New Jersey spends more money per highway than any other state in the United States, yet the condition of our roadways is the worst in the nation by any metric, any study you can look to. All of which is bad news for commerce and our regional economy in this area. Fact number five, and this is like I was shocked when I read this, more than 50% of CPAs in New Jersey are advising New Jersey residents and businesses to leave New Jersey immediately so they can save money for their futures. I mean, New Jersey CPAs are saying, get out of the state if you want to survive as a family, as a business. Yep. So, you're all depressed now, and I didn't have any depressed.
I told you we shouldn't have let voices.
Yeah, but it's the reality where our state is. Our senator can certainly talk about the same issues. We work together on all of these issues in the legislature. I'm on the assembly side, she's on the Senate side. We're fighting our best to bring some sanity to the legislature. There's out of control spending and out of control taxation in the legislature, and I'm being kind when I say that. So I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to now yield to these two fine ladies to talk more about the issues we all work together on in Trenton. And I rely upon these two women daily to advise me, to educate me on the solutions that we need to bring to our state to save our state. Make no mistake, the state is moving towards bankruptcy. If we don't get a handle on the economics, the taxation, the overregulation, none of us are going to be here. We're not going to want to be here, and our kids are certainly not going to want to put roots down here. So that was even worse, right? That was even more depressing. So without further ado, who's going next?
Yeah. So, one thing that Danielle did mention is that before I was involved in the government, I also worked in business for 30 years. So what I was going to talk about was what are the consequences, like what are the results, because that's kind of the business orientation of what are the results of all this. But then I will also get to some items that I think Danielle and the others advised that you want to know, what can I do about it? So what are a couple of things that I would suggest that we could focus on that would help make a significant improvement. So in terms of consequences of all those lists, all of which I have heard, and many more lists, unfortunately. Let's talk about a couple of indicators on our economy. So first is unemployment. So as context, prior to 2008, the Great Recession, New Jersey's unemployment rate was 4.5%. The U.S. average was 5%. So we were doing better than the rest of the United States on average before the Great Recession. Now, as we came through the recession and started to grow again, New Jersey, on many metrics, which I won't go through, we lagged the rest of the United States on creating jobs again, on our employment rates, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem really has persisted since then. We have lagged the United States since then, and we continue to lag the United States. So currently, our unemployment rate is the third highest in the country. We're at 6.3% versus the US average of 4%. That's 60% higher than the rest of the United States, the average of the United States. Another key indicator is number of jobs. I'm sure Chrissy will talk a bit about this. Most states have recovered fully their jobs pre-pandemic. We are still 150,000 jobs short of February of 2020 in terms of job recovery. And what these help inform, though, more at a more general level, is how our economy, we can anticipate now how it will perform as measured by GDP, or gross domestic product, as well as personal income growth. And on both of these metrics, before the pandemic, we were lagging the rest of the United States. So we were growing slower, so we had less employment, and we had not as many jobs created as the rest of the United States. Now, the last quarter, which some of you might know that or recognize that the governor pointed to in his State of the State address, pointed to the positive growth of GDP and personal income in the last quarter, is the only quarter actually that we grew in. And I posit, and I think a lot of people agree with me, that really what that reflected was our slow to reopen position. So other people have grown in the earlier quarters, and we suddenly began to grow in 3Q because we actually opened up much later. And I argue that because nothing has changed that would convince me that we're going to grow faster than the rest of the United States. We're not improving the environment, all the things that the Assemblyman went through. We aren't really on a trend to do that. One quarter does not, a trend make, to use what I'm saying. In fact, I'll give you some information about the gap is widening with other states. Right now, there are 11 states that, both red and blue, that have legislation to reduce personal income tax rates. There are 8 states that have proposals to cut corporate tax rates. And by the way, our 11.5%, we're the only one in the United States in double digits. Everyone else is a lower corporate tax rate in single digits and more, and declining in many states. There are 5 states that are looking at sales tax to either restructure or lower those tax rates. So things are getting more competitive. And that is what has to really be acknowledged, these cold hard facts and the things that we need to push for in terms of reforms at the state level. One other thing that, I think, an opportunity that we could work on that we're lagging on is how we're spending, or more aptly put, not spending all the federal relief that was sent to New Jersey. Last June,
Where did it all go?
yes, well, last June we were handed $6 billion, and to this moment, I don't know of a comprehensive accounting, and I talked to the senator before as well as the senator, a comprehensive accounting of not only how much has been spent, but what did we get? The federal aid that came down could have been used to replenish that unemployment fund. Inexplicably, what we decided to do was borrow the money from the federal government to now pay the claims and raise the unemployment payroll tax on all the businesses in New Jersey. So there's now over $1 billion in liability for all the businesses in our state that could have been spent on adding jobs and investing capital and growing our economy. And I know this is like a real hot button, Chrissy, so she's getting like anxious here. So that was one obvious example we could have done 7 months ago. The other one, and I think that this would have the greatest impact, is modernizing the information technology infrastructure for our state. There is no one thing I think we could invest in that would have more impact. I mean, need I talk about, right? Motor vehicles, unemployment, inside, by the way, inside the operation of the state government, that you want to do an analytic on the environment or education or anything inside Treasury, they're dependent upon a declining cadre of individuals who know how to massage data to compensate for the antiquated infrastructure that we've got. It's no way to run a business, and it's certainly no way to run the government. And I think if we modernize our IT, we have the opportunity, and I know we have providers who want to work with us on it. There's no greater investment that will impact a widest swath of services to the widest swath of people in our state. Most important. And I'll close with just one more item. that is just a, you know, a continuing area that I keep focusing on, but trying to help make it more appreciated by, I think, the general public, is looking at the size of the pension payment. So there will be a very large, probably $7 billion pension payment made. And the appreciation that I want to start to communicate is that what you have to think about is that money better spent as improving the pension system or how it impacts our economy? And I'll argue that the current structure of the pension system is incompatible with a growing economy because of the escalating cost of that pension every year. Our economy isn't growing at the same rate, and it cannot keep up with it. It needs to be reformed, it needs to be modernized and look a lot more like the private sector. So please think about that pension payment, not about you know, what it means in terms of retirement for the public workforce, because we need to provide retirement savings, retirement for the public workforce. It just needs to be restructured. So with that, I'll stop, and hopefully those are some areas we can talk about later, and I'll turn it over to Chrissy.
So, as you said about being depressing, no one invites me to a dinner party anymore. I'm such a drag. But I do want to say I do have the pleasure of working with Assemblyman DePhillips and Senator Corrado, and they are definitely the voice of reason in Trenton. As was mentioned, my key role is being the lead lobbyist with a team at NJBIA to go and educate our legislative body as well as our governor's office on where the business community stands and what we would like to see to move New Jersey forward. The pressures are mounting, as Regina and the Assemblyman have mentioned. Those facts are exactly what my job is to educate the legislature that these are real and we're not growing. And so we go out and try to prioritize on behalf of the business community, from our smallest employers up to the largest corporations, how are we going to grow moving forward? And so I could talk forever because we literally span from the tax climate to healthcare, workforce development, energy, environment, labor mandates, innovation and technology, but we'll be here for breakfast. So I will try to be high level because I want to hear from you. The tax structure is extremely challenging. The budget is extremely challenging for us. And I don't see it getting better. Right now, the budget has grown on the spending side 25% over the last 4 years. As Regina mentioned, we had $6 billion come in, $4 billion is not spent. Of the $2 billion that has been allocated, we're not sure how much of the $2 billion has been actually spent and reached the business community. That's separate and apart from money that came into the counties, the municipalities, and to several of our departments as well. So really big issue, the budget and how we're going to spend those federal dollars. As Regina mentioned, the Unemployment Trust Fund is one of the ways we can help the business community because it is owed $1 billion. We borrowed the money as well, and now we are paying interest on such funds that we borrowed. So it's just trying to figure out how to work with the legislature or the governor's office to point these things out and encourage them to make sure the business community is whole, because the only reason the businesses laid off or had folks not go to work is because of a government mandate forcing them to close. So it's a big issue for us as well. As Regina mentioned, it doesn't make any sense to us that we have the third highest unemployment rate in the nation, yet our GDP has grown slightly, but we have a workforce crisis? I mean, you're going everywhere with help wanted signs out. And we're trying to figure out why, because you can't have the third highest unemployment rate and then have jobs opening. So why are folks not working? Like, what's that disconnect? Why is that happening? That's a really big issue. It's definitely impacting our healthcare system. I spend an enormous amount of time coalescing and coordinating with our healthcare associations, anywhere from the hospitals down to home care and hospice agencies, on trying to get the governor's office and the Department of Health to help us on the workforce crisis. We're in a pandemic. If there was anything the federal dollars should be used for, it's actually on the health aspect, which is making sure we have the workforce to take care of everybody. So that's always a challenge as well, and keeps us very busy. We also have an immigration challenge as well, with our seasonal employees on top of this. And so some of the shore areas, I hope you all come to the Jersey Shore. You probably saw a lot of waits and everything. That was because our seasonal workers are also not in the state of New Jersey. And so it doesn't seem to be like a big impact when you go from 5,500 down to about 1,500. But when you have a consolidated group of individuals who go to our tourist attractions, it has really big implications. We have been asking for a lot of those dollars also to go into long-term infrastructure projects, and we would love to see a plan on how we're going to spend those dollars so that we have those job creation moving forward. We have roads and bridges that need to be built. We have a tunnel that needs to be rebuilt. These things need to get done. They're going to drive our economy. We're in the Northeast, and we're situated so well to be a real economic driver. We're the top state, though, on the education, as we mentioned, for K through 12, which is wonderful, but we're also the top out-migration state of high school students going to college elsewhere. And so some may argue, well, that's fine. They should go to a college that they want to. We just don't understand why we're number one. Like, why the first, in this great K through 12, and then we go to higher ed and our students leave. And will they come back or not, we're not sure. And so when you say about folks leaving New Jersey, what's challenging for us is, the census may go up, but our adjusted gross income, so the amount of wealth that has left, is in the billions of dollars. And so it's a very challenging message to get across, and our responsibility is to try to educate everyone on those key indicators, because we want to be that economic driver. It's literally in our vision statement at NJBIA to bring New Jersey back to the innovation state that it once was. We have the workforce, that we're very well educated, we are perfectly positioned. We just need to make sure that we're competitive, not only with our surrounding states, the United States, but now even internationally. The world has changed, and I really hope that our policymakers look at it from that vision and know that we need to create jobs, and jobs are key economic drivers. We obviously have seen if folks aren't working, unemployment trust fund goes broke, another $1 billion is owed. That doesn't happen if folks are working. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. I don't mean to be all doom and gloom either, but what you can do is call your legislator as well to get involved, because what happens is they only hear from certain groups, and they need to hear from folks like yourselves about what your concerns are so that they can bring that to their committee discussions to help influence legislation. The devil's in the details in these bills. They may have a lovely title. They may even say affordability. But if you read them, they can be challenging. So my ask of you all is to get engaged. I'm glad you're here, and I look forward to having this conversation this evening.
Because it's obvious why. My first question is, why is it that we're implementing such a high corporate tax rate, especially when you see that everybody's doing mass exodus out of New Jersey. And of course, what that leads to is unemployment. So why is our corporate tax rate so high?
It's simply that high because the governor, the legislature, the infrastructure, the political infrastructure in Trenton want the money. They want the money. They need the money to put out programs that really are not supporting our communities, not supporting the economy, not supporting job creators, not supporting new job creation. It's basically, and Kristen can talk to this, it's pet projects and other projects and pork that is not suitable for the money that is being raised. So none of that money is going back into the general economy, going back into job creation. It's just to pay bills, to pay for programs that we don't believe are working. Meanwhile, $6 billion is falling from the sky in the federal government, and what happens? The state of New Jersey the governor doesn't cut the budget, if you just got $6 billion, you'd say, great, you know, we now can save $6 billion over here. So, you know, so the spending is out of control. It's an addiction. I always say there's an addiction to taxation and spending in New Jersey.
And the question that I challenge, anybody who tells you they're working on affordability, tell me what's gonna go down in my monthly bills, right? Is my gas going down, and the utilities going down, is my rent going down? What's going down at the end of my month? And that is the question nobody can answer, especially not the individuals who are driving the agenda right now. And that's that I think we have to put people in the corner and actually make them answer that question.
One of the questions is, will property taxes ever go down? And is it a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, they can go down if we actually have, diligent legislators who would vote that way. The state resources can be put into the communities, into the towns, into the municipalities to lower the tax burdens in our communities. So, you know, we have a different idea for state spending. You know, some people want to spend every last dollar for every program that we can't afford. I would rather, you know, direct state resources into, you know, communities in District 40. Give those dollars to the schools in District 40, to the municipalities in District 40. Take the money so they can lower their own spending. That's the point of having the money, is so they can lower their own spending. You know, property taxes are, you know, a creature of municipal government, county government, state government, all together. The state can help by providing property tax relief to the communities we represent. We want those monies directed to towns like Wyckoff and, you know, Midland Park and Totowa and the other communities we represent in New Jersey.
Can I add a little bit? That in addition, I think that it's also about leadership at the state level. And this is an optimistic at the very beginning of the comment, right? That what we showed ourselves was that between 2000 and 2010, property taxes went up between 5 and 7% every year to grow about 70% in that decade. Between 2010 and the end of the decade, it grew more like 2%, less than 2% a year, because the cap went on. It really wasn't the cap, it was the leadership of people saying, okay, I have to live this way, so how do I make it work? And there's no town that I know of anyway who's collapsed because they had to live under a 2% cap. We could, as a, you know, if you had strong leadership at the state level, say no increases in property taxes for the next 5 years. People would figure it out. But that's not the leadership that we've got now. And that's the kind of leadership I know we have in some members of the legislature, but we just need more voices like that.
And by the way, we don't have a 2% cap at the state level. We have it at the local municipal level. So municipalities, township committees in our district are responsible. They live within the 2% cap. There's no cap at the state level. As Chrissy said, when I first became a legislator in 2018, the budget was $34 billion. 4 years later, it's $46 billion. So it's a runaway train. There's no fiscal, you know, sanity around it. It's just, let's pump more money out into programs because it's a political calculation.
When you say programs, what do you mean by that?
Programs in, you know, inner cities. I mean, Governor Murphy spent $40 million of our tax dollars directed towards immigrants in the state of New Jersey. And obviously my relatives were immigrants too, but shouldn't it be necessary to have, you know, citizens should be receiving tax relief, tax benefits from the state of New Jersey. It shouldn't be directed to immigrants who are not even citizens in the state. That's my opinion. Agree, disagree.
It's just simple enough, because the more people that leave, the more you have to raise taxes to cover the bills of the state. And so if we can't figure out how to keep people, those taxes are just gonna keep going up. I mean, as a Jersey financial advisor, I actually advise people to leave.
Yeah.
Which is terrible, because I'm from Garfield, and I'm not leaving. But I don't know how you stop the train if you can't stop the outflow.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. I mean, and that's the same advice that I was mentioning before, that, you know, CPAs are telling people, just get out while you can, before it gets worse.
Yeah, and you know what I always kid about, you know, in terms of the bottom or the top of all these bent lists. I say to people, you don't have to be number one, but get in the middle 50%. I mean, just make it a little bit better because of all the assets we have, right? I mean, geography is wonderful, all the things we've talked about tonight. but just get into the middle 50, just move up a little bit. We don't even have an ambition to improve our position right now. That's the kind of attitude we need, I think, in representatives, that we just want to improve 20%, pick a number, but not sit at the bottom of every list, which is where we are.
Concerning us compared to, say, Massachusetts and spending for education and medical, could part of the problem be that we have one of the strongest unions across the United States, and that raises the cost for our fundings?
Well, you mentioned Massachusetts. Massachusetts is not that dissimilar to, New Jersey. I mean, they have strong unions in Massachusetts. They have high taxes, but they have more targeted ways of spending money. In life sciences, like Cambridge and Boston, going to Massachusetts for life sciences jobs, they're not staying in the Princeton corridor or Morristown, where our life sciences hubs are. They sell the state. We don't know how to sell our state. We have lots of things to be proud of in the state. Beaches, mountains, schools. We talked about K through 12 schools. We have excellent schools. But we don't know how to sell the state. Now, young people, and I have 4 children, and they talk about, what is New Jersey going to offer me to keep me here, right? I can go to Boston or Cambridge. Those are cool places to live. What do we have to do? Are they going to want to live in New Brunswick, which is part of the life sciences corridor? So we have to do a better job of recreating the state and finding a way to keep the next generation here, because our kids are going to leave, and guess what? Then we're going to leave, because we want to be with our kids and we want to be with our grandchildren someday. So the kids, and I think, Chrissy, you talked about this, young people are not choosing New Jersey to put roots down. They are leaving to go to the best universities and the best colleges throughout the United States, oftentimes in the Northeast, not far from here. But they, by and large, are not coming back here. So we have no plan, no strategic plan to keep the next generation here, which means that we're not going to have an economy to support. And job creators and families like yours are going to be gone.
Well, and if you kind of look at the history, by the way, in Massachusetts, most of us in this group are old enough to remember, it used to be called Taxachusetts, right? Because of how high their taxes were relative. They've been on a 20-year plan, essentially, to reorient, and now all of their taxes are lower. Property taxes, their sales tax, their income tax, their corporate taxes are all lower than ours. And they have figured it out, right? How to provide excellent education, a great quality of living, recruiting all of the high-paying research in the pharma industry, up to that, working with universities. So it's very doable. I'm a real optimist about New Jersey. I mean, it depresses me when I hear everybody's thinking about leaving, because I think it's very fixable. You just have to have the right leadership and a sense of long-term, not the next election, right? A long-term plan that people are willing to push on.
So let's shift a little bit, since you're talking about leadership. So let's talk about voting. Since it's really important that we all take part in voting. Last week I was part of a meeting where where the next push is trying to get same-day voter registration, where you could walk into, poll place and register to vote and vote at the same time. Meanwhile, last week I went to change my driver's license from the real ID to the regular license to the real ID, and I had to take my passport. I had to take my birth certificate that was shredded, just to prove that I was who I was. So the next question is, how do we ensure voter integrity? Do you see any campaigns either advertising, selling ballots, and other illegal activities as a crime with penalties, or whistleblower campaign with monetary rewards?
That is a loaded
Loaded
question.
question.
Yeah. I might pose the question a different way. I want people to vote. So there are a lot of people in this room who supported Jack Ciattarelli for governor. I'm a Republican, and the Republican Party, said over and over again that Jack would be the best governor. We've got to stop the fiscal insanity that I'm talking about. We've got to stop taxation. We've got to defeat the current governor. And the Republicans, could not have found a better candidate to become governor. 39% of Republicans voted on election day in November. So he came close. If 49% had voted, or 50% had voted, we'd have a new governor. So I don't want to keep raising issues about, you know, voter irregularities and fraud because it scares people away from voting. We would have a new governor if the, you know, the Republican Party, and I'm a proud Republican, has no one to blame but themselves for the fact that Governor Murphy got reelected. Because people stayed home. 61% of Republicans did not vote. And I think they're, you know, and this is not a political organization. I know you have independents and Democrats in the group. I don't care what you are, you should vote.
I had another opportunity to get involved. I actually volunteer as a poll worker. It's not volunteer, they pay me, be a poll worker. And it's enlightening what you find out just sitting there all day long, how things happen. And in Morris County, it's embarrassing to admit, but there aren't enough people who are volunteering. There's a whole generation of poll workers who are retired because they were elderly and they didn't want to, because of COVID, go back, you know, into that interaction. So there's enormous opportunity. I strongly recommend, if you're willing, and there's more days that they need poll workers, right? Early voting, I'm kind of the mindset that I think the Democratic have really figured out how to do mail-in voting. And there's enormous distrust that's been built on the Republican side. And I'm just taking that as a given. If that's true, then early voting is the opportunity for the Republican side, I think. Because
the election just happened and it's over, and so I always take it as a point that you learn from what happened, regardless of what it is. And I do think there's a lot of things you can do. Somebody said about reaching out to your legislators. And we hear from a lot of you, and we know what your positions are, and it does influence how we vote. We always say, don't just call us, call the other side, and let them know. Because if you think it doesn't matter, it does. And we've had examples down in Trenton where things did not pass because people were vocal. And you've seen some of that, whether it's been, you know, moms going down and protesting or hurt. Even as recently as the executive order, whether it was going to be extended or not, people called their legislators and listened. You know, they listened because they do have to run for re-election, and we're all going into the process of redistricting. So we have to do the same thing on budget issues, on what's important. The business community, they are such an important community. All of us are in business one way or the other, and I'm sure there's many of us in the room that own our small businesses. Our voices have to be heard. One way to do that is by joining organizations like New Jersey VAIA. We do listen to them. They come and they represent the community because they've listened to their constituents and their business owners. There's always a dialogue going. The dialogue never stops. We're always meeting with our constituent groups. And we meet with individuals too. Somebody calls the office and says, can we meet with you? If all three of us can meet, we do. If it's just one, even if it's just we couldn't be there, you know, we have people in our offices that are there to listen. The voice matters. It doesn't matter the issue. If it's important to you, it should be important to your legislator. So pick up the phone, reach out, don't ever stop. We don't ever stop listening. And a lot of our ideas, true, come from you. We get great ideas from the community on legislation that we should be working on. And to go back to the mask again, I just assumed, and I shouldn't have assumed, that if you had a special needs child that was in the school system that was getting an IEP or getting speech therapy, that you would not have to wear your mask while you were getting speech therapy. Common sense, right? I was floored to find out that kids are still wearing their masks for speech therapy. So we're introducing legislation to address it. A lot of times our ideas come directly from you, and then there'll be times too, we're gonna ask you to support us, because when we're down there and we turn around and we have all of you behind us, it sends a really powerful message, and they do listen, the administration does listen.
Two, how do we ensure all government employees are competent and efficient? How do we enforce anti-nepotism policies on local levels?
this is the second to last question.
Wait for the last one.
We could have a second meeting for this.
Did anyone deal with the Department of Labor and unemployment during COVID?
Yes.
Okay. So Regina's point before about technology, talk about antiquated technology, that is, you know, has to be a priority because people were abused in our state by the antiquated technology. They would file claims, they would get lost.
you.